Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Be sure to subscribe and like on your favorite listening platforms. And if you want to catch the show live, jump on over to our YouTube channel. I am so excited to have Felipe Lopez. Felipe is a licensed architect who has been working with Joe Architect since 2012. Shortly after he graduated from the University of Colorado at Denver's Master of Architectural program. He is now a project manager guiding numerous clients through the process of designing and building their one-of-a-kind facilities across North America. His greatest joy at work is building relationships with everyone involved while helping them navigate through the complex processes for designing and building their ideal space. For fun, he and his wife enjoys the outdoors, camping, kayaking, hiking, and he trains for half marathons with the hopes of running a full marathon in the near future. Please join me in welcoming Felipe Lopez. All right, Felipe, I am so excited to have you on Hey Docs, and I cannot wait for our audience to hear what you have to say. I know I work with so many startup doctors and doctors that are in, kind of the second stage of their career where they now can build their ideal, perfect dream practice. And I know the Joes have been, a big company in our industry that's really facilitated helping doctors bring their practices to fruition. And so I'd love it if you wouldn't mind just kind of telling us a little bit in your own words about yourself, how you got here, about the Joes, and then we're just going to kind of jump in, and I'm gonna ask you some good questions that I know people are gonna want to hear answers to.
That's great. Well, thanks for having me, Jill. I appreciate being able to share however we can. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Felipe Lopez. I'm one of the architects and project managers at Joe Architect. I've been there for about 10 years. And I remember working with you in year one. So this relationship's been great, Jill.
Yes.
But a little bit about our firm. Again, if you don't know who we are, we're a full services architectural and interior design firm. And we specialize in designing dental, everything from like ortho, pediatric, endo, just anything dental related. We can help with those designs, with those build outs. We've been doing it for about 23 years.
Wow.
So we started in Colorado, and actually the firm's called Joe Architect because there's two Joes that started it. So there's a reason why
Yes.
It's called Joe Architect.
Yep.
One of the Joes, Joe Miller, he recently retired a couple years ago, but Joe Church, he's still one of the owners. So there's still a Joe. And yeah, we started in Colorado. That's where we're based out of. But we found that, I think 10 years in, there's doctors all over the country that were looking for help, not just in Colorado.
Right. So
we started to figure out, hey, how are we able to do this? And of course, because of technology, being able to share videos, photos, emails, very easy to get in touch with people. We found that working remote and just working across the country just wasn't a problem. So that was great. So in fact, most of the work that we do is not in Colorado. It comes in waves, right? But yeah, so we've been doing this for a long time. And we're always looking to increase our team, but really just helping doctors understand the process, what this looks like of designing and building a practice, especially if they haven't done this before. There's a lot of moving parts in this. It could be very overwhelming.
Yes.
That's why it's fantastic when they reach out to you. I know early on when doctors are saying, I'm with Jill Allen, then I already know you've given them a roadmap, which is fantastic. For those of you who, for the doctors who aren't working with a consultant, usually when they call us out of the blue, just like, hey, I think I need an architect for this, we normally spend about an hour plus just going over the process with them,
yes,
giving them giving them information that they need, everything from construction costs to how long this is going to take, what's all involved, who they need to reach out to, really just trying to help them understand this kind of endeavor they're about to embark on. So
yeah. And I think that's why I have really loved working with you guys as well. And we have had a really long relationship, as far as, it's crazy to think back and think how many practices we've done together. And they've all definitely, if anybody's always out searching for the vision of a practice, I will always guarantee there will be a Joe Architect office at least once or twice on their vision board, because you guys just have, just wonderful designs and have been doing this for so long. And as we kind of talk through this, and I love that, you guys are a full service architectural firm. And I think, a lot of people don't really understand what that means, but do you want to just kind of talk about that? Because I definitely think we see some differences in different firms out there.
Absolutely. So when you're reaching out to a designer, whether it's an interior designer or architect, pay attention to the services that they're offering, mainly because everyone offers different quantities of services. For us, for example, when I say full services with architectural and interior design, we're kind of a one-stop shop for everything that's architectural. So we design the floor plan, we sculpt your space, detailed drawings, provide a full architectural construction set. But we have interior designers. And that means that we're also picking all your finishes, designing all the cabinetry, picking light fixtures, plumbing fixtures. So again, we're designing all of it. We also bring engineers to the table. They're not Joe Architect employees, but for most build outs, you're going to need a mechanical, plumbing, and electrical engineer. Sometimes, especially in California, you'll probably need a structural engineer too. But I'll stick with those three. We call those MEPs, so mechanical, electric, and plumbing. So we'll bring them to the table because most doctors, they don't even know what architect to use, much less a mechanical engineer, right?
Right.
So we're trying to make that process easy. So we bring them to the table. Obviously, these engineers would be licensed in whatever state you're in, just like we would be. And that's another big thing to note. Make sure that your designer or architect is licensed to stamp drawings in your state. Because once you have a full set of drawings, you need to submit that to the city for permit review. And every jurisdiction is different depending on the building department. But I'd say 99% of them are going to require an architect's stamp.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Again, that's something that we offer. And then we're coordinating with those engineers. So, when you reach out to some designers, interior designers, or even architects, sometimes they only offer a portion of this work. So some architects might say, hey, I only designed the floor plan and the ceiling plan, but that's it. I'm not picking finishes. I don't really know what the look and feel is going to be like. Why don't you hire an interior designer to help you with that separately? That's fine, but we find that the process is broken when you do that. Because interior design is really not about slapping finishes on a project. It's way more cohesive and a holistic approach when you have these designers starting on day one, and it starts with the floor plan, right?
Yep.
So so that's why I believe working with a full service architectural and interior design firm all in-house, there's a lot of benefits to that. Plus, you're not having to coordinate with two different companies. You're already going to be coordinating with a number of people and companies. So this helps limit that at least by one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, when I'm working with startups and, doctors, it's not like this is your only project that you're doing. You've got your associateship job and maybe another job and maybe, this and that and whatever. So I think the more cohesive and, the more you can kind of get one thing done in one area, it just helps all the way around.
Absolutely.
What you were saying kind of leads me to a question, that I have for you that I get asked a lot. And do you have any tips for conveying office vision to an architect? And I think, it's kind of like trying to say, I like blue. Well, blue is a lot, there's a lot of colors of blue, but I think that this is something that my docs really get hung up on is I have this something in my head and I think I know what I want, but I don't know if it's right. So can you kind of give us some tips on some of the best practices or things that you've seen that have really helped a lot in that?
Yes, because this is very important. If you hire an architect or designer and you aren't having a conversation about what your vision is, a step has been missed. But the architect should guide you through that conversation. So a lot of our doctors that we're working with, I find that there's two groups. One group, they really know what they want and they're good at expressing that, and that's great. There's another group that has no idea what they want, and that's fine too. That's what we're here for. But the big thing is you have to make sure you're expressing what your vision is to that architect before they design.
Yes.
Telling them what you want it to do after they've designed. Obviously, they'll have to redesign it if they didn't hit the nail on the head, which probably won't happen.
They didn't.
If you didn't have that conversation. So it's about communication early on, and then making sure that architect understands what your goal is. So our firm, for example, we use Pinterest, or we have our clients use Pinterest.
Yes, me too.
We found that describing it, for example, we get this a lot. I want a modern practice. Okay, that can mean a trillion.
It's like blue, right?
Just like the blue, right? Like, is it how modern? Is it ultra modern? Is everything white? Or are you just talking about clean lines? So the words are fine to describe what you're looking for, but we found that images do a way better job. So like I said, we use Pinterest because we find that most of our doctors already have it. They know how to use it. But really what it boils down to is a compilation of images. Now, I'm going to give you some tips here too. So you're doing Pinterest, right? What we end up telling doctors is, okay, put a board together. It does not have to be even remotely dental related. That's not what's important. We don't need to see some of the offices that we designed on your Pinterest board. If you want to talk about those things, fantastic. But I make it clear that that's not a requirement, because a lot of doctors get hung up on that. Like, oh, I need to find another dental office that I like. And that's not what this is about. No. It could be anything: residential, restaurants. I mean, I even had a client, she just had a bunch of super colorful high heels, and it has nothing to do with dental, right? But she wanted to talk about the color and the overall kind of like aesthetic of that. Yep. And it was all conceptual, right? Obviously, we didn't design a high heel, but it was all conceptual. So you can be as literal as you want or conceptual, but the big things that we're trying to get out of this conversation is, again, if it's modern, how modern? Because there's thresholds where people, they get uncomfortable when it seems sterile, right?
Yep.
Because that's a big thing in the dental community. They don't want their offices to feel ultra sterile. They want it to feel welcoming, but still modern. We're finding a trend away from traditional, just traditional design. And most of the offices we do, if you've been on our website, you'll see most of those are more of the modern take. But again, trying to figure out what that means for that doctor.
Yeah.
Another big thing, Jill, is their branding. So there's two things to bring up during this kind of vision conversation that you're having with your architect. If you've got any branding material established, even if it's as simple as a logo, share it. It's going to be colors on there, depending on the shape or what have you. The architect might be able to take some cues from that interject it into the office design. Now, if you don't have anything, that's fine too. What we find is that many of our doctors, they're like, oh no, I haven't even started that process yet. And that's okay. What ends up happening is once we design the office, and now you know what your colors are, the materials, how modern, you're going to have information like perspectives, 3D drawings, materials palette. You can send all that to your marketing and branding agency at that point and say, hey, this is what my office is going to look like.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yep.
And so I want you to design my website and all my marketing materials so they have the same kind of language and vocabulary as my office design. Because we find when you do that, your brand just becomes that much stronger.
Absolutely. And, and I think that this is tough sometimes because a lot of times we aren't necessarily starting with the brand when we're thinking about designing an office. But I do think many, many times, most of my docs have an idea of what their name might be, or kind of have kicked around some colors that they are thinking about, or, kind of lend themselves to for when that true brand identity kind of develops. And I just can't say it enough. I 100% agree with you. I mean, I think having those vision boards to give to your architect from the design element. And I'm going to add, I even suggest with my clients that not only do we have a board that's just everything we like, I really like to have them pin a board of things that they don't like, because I think that can also really help a lot if you're like, you just see on their board over and over, dark woods, dark colors, bold fonts. And you're like, okay, I can see it's, it becomes very apparent when you look at it as a whole, what they don't like, but they might not have been able to articulate that to you. So I really like those contrasting boards when we're looking at that design component for you.
And the other thing that just reminded me when you were talking is, even if you send this vision board to your architect, the job's not done. You have to go over those images with the architect.
Yes.
Because what's going to happen is you might like a light fixture in a room, and that's why you pinned or shared that image, that photo. And if you don't let the architect know that, they might think, hey, you just like that room or whatever space it's in, when in fact, you hate that space. It's really just about the light fixture. But if you're not having those conversations, I really wouldn't let the architect just assume, hey, well, I sent them photos, they're going to figure it out. Definitely make sure that you're talking to them about what you like. And just like you said, Jill, what you don't like about certain things, because that helps too.
Yep. So we kind of covered like the vision in regard to design, but I kind of want to just dive in for a minute about the actual structure of the office. So if a doc were coming to you and saying, I'm going to have 2,500 square feet or whatever, but I think it's very hard to conceptualize, well, what can go into that? Do you guys help them kind of, I know as a consultant that does startups all the time, I have a pretty good understanding of about how many ops we can get and about how many consult rooms and kind of how we're designing for future, because we definitely have seen big changes in the way we're designing that out. But do you guys also help with, kind of helping docs come up with that too, in accordance to the size of their office?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is kind of a rule of thumb that I believe dental vendors came up with. It depends on your specialty, right? Because obviously ortho, let's say general dental, very different. Ortho, you've got open bays with, you can line up more chairs next to each other. General dental, individual rooms, obviously that's going to take up more space. Yep. So depending on your specialty, there's a ratio. But the thing is that ratio is really kind of like a starting point. It used to be one chair per 450 square feet or something to that extent. But we don't really go off of that because every doctor is different.
Yeah.
They want different things, and it's going to depend on your space, right? So 2,500 square feet, a couple things that will impact this. Hey, are there common restrooms? in the building that are ADA accessible. If there are, that might mean you just want one bathroom in your suite or no bathrooms because you don't need it.
Yep.
So that means potentially another chair or some other programmatic piece. So, so we can help navigate through that. Now, what we do is we provide something called a test fit, which is really a quick pass at a floor plan when the doctors require it. Now, if they're moving into like a retail space that's just like a rectangle, we'll be able to tell them like, hey, you're going to be able to fit these amount of chairs. We'll figure it out. I'm not worried about it. Now, if it's like a really weird space, or especially like in California, tiny.
Tiny, yes.
Southern California,
instead of tiny houses, it's tiny offices.
I should clarify that. In Southern California, everything's small because real estate's really expensive.
Yeah.
So that's when a test fit can really help, because it's like, hey, I've got, I don't know, 1,200 square feet. I'm trying to fit X amount of chairs. Can it be done? But it's also like a weird shape, right? Maybe the building envelope or just your suite is not a rectangle or a square. It's a weird shape. A test fit, like I said, is a quick us designing up one pass at a floor plan. It's not your final floor plan. It's just a floor plan, just to give you or the doctors a sense of scale. Like, okay, now I see a dental chair on this floor plan. Now I can kind of understand how big or small things are. So definitely, if you're unsure about your space, what you can fit in there, lean on your architect and get their input.
Yep. That's perfect. So let's say we've got a doc that's been working with you guys and we have went through design and we've went through the structural component. And now we're at a point where we've even made it through mechanical. So we've got all of our drawings and now we have to figure out how much is this going to cost to build it, right? Because that's the next key part, and everybody wants to know that.
Budget. Yeah.
Can you kind of talk us through the difference between a negotiated bid and a bid process? Because I feel like this comes up all the time, and I even feel like we've seen some changes, especially as construction costs and different things have changed a little bit too. But can you kind of talk through what that means? And then I know you guys can handle both sides of it actually, I'm not sure if you do both sides of it or not, but can you kind of talk through that? And then, what doctors can kind of expect with that?
Yeah, sure. So we call it negotiated bid or competitive bid. So a negotiated bid, the term is confusing because you would think a negotiated bid would mean that's when you have multiple contractors pricing it, but it's not. So I'll start with the competitive bid because that one's easier to explain. So competitive bid means you've got, your drawings are done, you're ready to get pricing. The architect then reaches out to, let's say it's typically 3 contractors.
Yep.
You don't want to do more than 3 usually, because then that means that whoever's bidding the project, their chances of winning have diminished the more people that you bring to the table. And what that means is that they're less inclined to want to participate, or unfortunately, during the process, they might say, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. Sorry. Yep. But the competitive bid process means you've got 3 contractors. Normally takes for like a tenant improvement, if you're just doing the interior, takes about 2 to 3 weeks. Then they pull the pricing together. Your architect should be reviewing all those numbers. I know, Jill, if you're involved, I know you're reviewing them too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then we ask whatever questions we need to get clarification. But at the end of the day, the doctor is making the choice. Now, this is going to be important because during the competitive bid process, when they give you the numbers, they're also giving you schedule, or they should be. That's going to be important too, because that might be the reason why you go with someone over someone else. The one, I guess, advice I have is don't just go with the lowest bidder because they're the lowest bidder.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that, hey, you should never pick the lower bidder, because maybe that lower bidder is a great contractor. But if your architect is worried about that contractor missed some numbers or their number is really low in comparison to everyone else that bid it, there might be problems there. So just be aware of that, because then during construction, that's where you can run into some heartache, and you get what's called change orders in the field, which is like,
nobody wants change orders.
Yeah, they're like, and a change order is just, it's usually, I mean, obviously, if you're getting a credit, then great.
Yeah.
But it's usually the other way around. Like, the contractor forgot to price this, or they didn't include this. So this is how much it's going to cost now to do it. So those are things we're all trying to avoid during this bid process. So that's the competitive bid. Now, the negotiated bid is just one contractor. So you're dealing with one contractor, and it typically happens, you bring them on early on, like as early as when as the architect's on board. And there's pros and cons to each. So the pros for the competitive bid is that you're seeing everyone's pricing. And then you can make an educated decision as to who you want to move forward with. The con with a negotiated bid is that even if you're getting awesome pricing from that one contractor, if you can't compare it to anyone else's numbers, you're going to think they're ripping you off. That's just the reality.
Whether they are or they're not.
Yeah, whether the number is completely in line with what it should be, or even if the number is great, it's just, I guess, human nature. If you're not comparing, you think that you're getting robbed, because contractors have this bad stigma, about doing that. And it's just, I mean, obviously it can be true, but it doesn't have to be. So anyways, those are the pros and cons. Nowadays, though, when you had mentioned, Jill, that things are kind of changing. So I'd like to say pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, we were seeing competitive bids were kind of just what everyone wanted.
Yep. We're
finding right now that competitive bids are actually very hard to come by, because everyone is so busy. All the contractors are so busy that most of them, they don't need to compete against other contractors. They're like, hey, I'm your contractor or I'm not, but I'm not going to waste time pricing it, because the reality is they're pricing it for 2 to 3 weeks. They're not making money doing that, especially if they're not winning the job. So they're not interested in doing that anymore, or as much. I mean, some contractors still will, but most are like, I'm not interested in doing that. And so that's a problem. The other problem is with everyone getting so busy. Let's say you got a competitive bid, you've got 3 guys on the table, they're bidding it. Well, since everyone's so busy, it's not an unforeseen conclusion that maybe they've got other projects out to bid at that time. If they get awarded some of that work while they're bidding yours, they're going to quit. They're going to say, hey, I just won this other job. I'm sorry, I can't price your project anymore. So that's a problem. Now, the bigger problem is, since everyone's so busy, let's say you really like a contractor, you really want to work with them, but you want to do a competitive bid. Drawings are done. You reach out to them. You're like, hey, all right, it's time to price things. They might say, yeah, I can't. I'm booked. I've got too much work. Sorry. And that's a reality. And so all of a sudden, the contractor that you really wanted to do your job no longer can do it. In a negotiated bid, that doesn't happen, because they're on board
committed
from day one. So, but most contractors nowadays, because this used to happen too back in the day, you do a negotiated bid, and then you get the guy's number, and then you don't like that number, and then you're like, let's put it out to bid. So
not anymore.
You can't do that anymore. I mean, back then it was a problem, but now most contractors, they'll make you sign an agreement or pay some sort of retainer, which is, I think that's totally fine. That's in their right to do, because they're going to be doing quite a bit of work before they even price the project. So, and no one likes to work for free, right? So just expect that. If you want to do a negotiated bid, there might be some agreements or some contracts that you're signing, and that's going to be normal now. So
and I think, I mean, you're saying everything that I'm seeing, out there as well. I just, right now, where we're at, 2022, contractors just aren't hungry like they were, and it's no skin off their nose to pass up a bid to go for a better one.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely seeing with my clients that we're seeing more and more of those negotiated bids right from the beginning. And like you said, there's some pros and cons that go along with that. But, sometimes it is kind of a handshake that you're agreeing that you're going to do your project at a certain number. But the nice thing is, we know from the beginning what that number is going to be. And I think that kind of allows us to, maybe also work with them a little bit if we're going to do some value engineering or different things like that, to be able to say, okay, our number's coming in here. Where can we kind of cut? And we're only working with one person to get us all in agreement, because we all still know we're moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the word value engineering. So for doctors who are unfamiliar with that, that's just when we get pricing back, you have a contractor on board, and then you're looking at ways of bringing the cost down. Yeah. So we call that process value engineering. And it could be as simple as like, hey, we're removing the quartz countertops and replacing them for plastic laminate countertops.
Yeah.
What's the cost savings there? So that process can be pretty intensive depending on how much you need to bring the cost down. I can assure you, no contractor, unless they're your contractor and you've hired them and you've got an agreement, no contractor is going to participate in value engineering unless they're hired.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that. And I think that kind of leads us to, just kind of where we're at with the economy and, build outs. And I don't know how you feel, but I really try and give my docs an understanding of so they have in their minds, and we know when we're looking at our budget, kind of where we should expect our per square foot cost build out to be. And I would assume that working with you as architects, when we're doing, our bids and whatnot, especially if we're doing a negotiated bid and we're saying, hey, we're trying to come in, 185 a square foot, so I'm just throwing out a number there. Mm-hmm. But I think that also kind of helps, I would think, even for you as architects to be able to kind of have an idea that, you're building, trying to value engineer to kind of hit the numbers that we're looking for.
Absolutely. Don't be worried about sharing your construction budget with your architect. That's one of the first things that we ask. Our fees in particular have nothing to do with construction costs. So whether your space costs $10 million to build or $100,000, it has nothing to like. Yes. We don't make more or less money off of that. Our fees aren't tied to construction costs, but it's important for us to know what your budget is. And you might not know what it is, but you might have some idea of where you want to go. Share that with your architect, because again, I'd love to say across the board in the US, all construction costs are the same. That's just not the reality. Not the reality. They are not. So it depends where you're at.
Yeah.
Really, it depends where you're at. So talk to your architect early on. Hey, what are you seeing? What can I expect? We have those conversations very early on, because sometimes if the budget is too tight, sometimes it doesn't make sense to bring an architect like us to the table.
Yeah.
People don't just hire us for our designs. We also, it's this whole process, like coordinating, holding their hand through this entire process. But there are other architects out there who can do similar things, I guess, for less. It might not be the same caliber of what we're doing, but maybe that's what you can afford based on everything else. So I would highly encourage you to share that information with your architect, because again, they need a design. Let's say that you have a number in mind and it's a realistic number. We can hit it. Well, then we should be designing your office to try to hit that number. Yeah. If we don't know what that number is, then obviously we don't know where to stop when it comes to design. We'll give you a gold toilet.
Right.
So, no, we would never do that. But, but having an idea of where the parameters are based on budget really helps architects understand what they should be showing clients and what they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But Jill, I got to tell you, it's just, The last 2 years have just been really difficult to even have these conversations because pricing has been fluctuating like crazy. So,
Yes.
and it's on certain materials. It's not even labor. I mean, labor is always going up, right? But it's just certain material, like all of a sudden copper piping for your plumbing goes up, I don't know, 25% in like the span of 2 weeks. That's all of a sudden your plumbing numbers like $15,000 more than it should be because copper just went up.
Yeah. Yep.
Just because it went up.
Yeah.
We're seeing that. And so it's hard to kind of navigate where projects should be coming in at right now. But all we can do is provide information of what we know, what things are costing right now.
Right now. Yep.
With the caveat that like, hey, we're starting this process. You're not going to get pricing done right now.
Yeah.
Your pricing happens months from now. And so I don't know what's going to happen with the economy months from now. So it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So as we kind of finish up today, I've got one last question. And I just, again, this has been great. I know people are just eating this up because this is all the stuff that you kind of hear, but don't hear and don't know a lot about. But if you were to leave our docs with maybe just some tips on sticking to budgets, in regard to construction costs. And again, we know that it's very fluid right now. But what are some things that can just help a doc, as they're going through the process, kind of stick to their budget? Because I know it can be really easy to just get so caught up in the process and to just say, yes, 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 I like this. I want this. And
then you get the pricing and you're like, no,
exactly. So
yeah.
can you kind of leave us with that as kind of your final thoughts and maybe, one or two tips on, really helping docs stick to their budget?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about managing expectations. So it's not to say that you can't have a dream list of things of that you want, but listen to your architect when they start talking to you about, hey, if you do this, this is going to save money. For example, a quick one is bathrooms. So people think bathrooms are not a big deal, but when you build out a bathroom, walls, ceilings, exhaust fan, plumbing, drain lines, tile, all that ends up being about $10,000 to $15,000.
Yep.
If you don't need the bathrooms in your suite because you've got common bathrooms that are ADA accessible, try to use those because that will save a lot of money on your end. A lot of doctors are like, that's fine. I have bathrooms, but then I want my own personal private bathroom with a shower and things like that. That's fine if it's on your wish list of things to want, but don't get married to those things because the less plumbing that you have, sinks in general too, like let's say you've got placing sinks everywhere, that adds up real quick. It's not just the cost of the sink and the faucet you got to worry about, all the plumbing that goes into it. So that's an easy way to kind of save on cost. The other one is also knowing where. So have your architect design everything, but it doesn't mean you need to build everything out on day one. So a good example of this is, let's say, your doctor's office, your personal office. So your architect designed your countertop, you've got cabinetry, upper cabinets, whatever it is. That's great. But let's say you're trying to save on cost. Okay, let's scrape all the millwork in that room. Doctor, just buy some furniture from IKEA or wherever, right?
Yes.
That's fine. You still have the drawings. Like you still have access to how to build out your doctor's office. Let's say 1 year from that point, when you've got cash flow, you reach out to the contractor, say, okay, now I want you to build out this room how I originally intended it. That's fine. Another big thing is dental equipment. So that's going to be a big one, Jill. Definitely have everything plumbed in, all the utilities, compressed air, vac, electrical, have all those things installed on day one, as though you're going to fit out your entire practice with everything on day one. Now, especially for new starts, that's just not, it's not realistic because dental equipment, as everyone knows, is expensive. So, but have all of the utilities in on day one planned for. And so let's say you've got 4 chairs. Maybe you only fit out 2 or 3 of those
Yep, which is
on
what I
day one.
usually suggest. Yep.
Yeah. And then on day whatever, 120, then you order the chair in the cart. It's plug and play at that point,
Yep.
But definitely don't don't skimp on the utilities and say, oh, I'll do the utilities later too. No, that's like, that'll be way more expensive, sometimes just impossible to do after the fact. But that's a quick way to save on cost. It's plan for everything now, but build some of the stuff that you're okay with building later.
Yeah, that's great. Such good information. And I know we're really in sync with this too. And, I echo what you say, to my clients, as well. It's just, if we can be smart about what we're doing, not be too excessive with what we're doing. And I think just surrounding yourself with a good team of people that are going to help. I mean, absolutely anybody can do this on their own, but it's, sometimes it's just a matter of how quickly do you want to get to where you want to get to, and potentially how many mistakes do you want to have to survive.
The learning curve is higher.
Yes, it definitely is. It definitely is. Well, this has been great. And before I let you go, I want to finish up with our speed round. So, are you ready for the speed round challenge?
I will do my best.
Okay. All right. So, how about this one? Describe your style in one word.
Simple.
Oh, I like it. Okay. What are you listening to or watching right now?
Watching right now. I do the Game of Thrones. So I'm looking at House of the Dragon.
Oh, that's the second time somebody has said that. So I am going to have to watch that because I like Game of Thrones too.
I mean,
so House of the Dragon.
If people are thinking that I go home after a day of work and I'm watching like fixer-upper programs, like I need to remove myself from the design world when I get home. And if it's just TV, it's usually like sci-fi or things like that.
Yep.
Fantasy.
Yep, that is me too. I need something that doesn't apply to anything that I do in real life.
Exactly.
If you were doing something just for you, what would that be?
So I started doing this a couple years ago. I don't do yoga. I've tried and failed miserably, but there's a yoga pose called Shavasana. It means corpse pose. Oh. It seems like the easiest one. All you do is lay down, and it's about clearing your mind and paying attention to your breathing, but you're not supposed to move at all. And so you do this for like 5 or 10 minutes. I normally like listen to a recording and they kind of walk you through the process, but I don't know. I find like it helps doing that every now and again.
I love that. I love that. I am definitely not good at yoga. I'm the clumsiest yoga person ever. So you
could even do this one. It's really
I know. I think I might be able. That sounds about right up my up my alley.
Exactly.
Okay. So as we finish up, hidden talent.
So not a lot of people know this, but I lived in Colombia for a large portion of my life. And so I love dancing, salsa, merengue. I would be careful with the word talent here. I have fun doing it. I guess I would consider myself okay at it, but it's not like I'm dancing with the stars or anything like that.
That's awesome. Well, you have to save me a dance sometime. I will be the worst dance partner ever.
It'll happen at some point, probably at the AAO or something.
There you go. There you go. That's perfect. All right. And then to finish us up, do you have any big, hairy, audacious goals that you're working towards?
I do. It's one with my wife. We only have run half marathons. That's our limit. Mm-hmm. My brain can't even conceive that that's the half point. So what we're trying to do is train for a full marathon at some point. So
that's great.
We run together. So it's just, but I still can't even imagine me doing it. But we'll get there.
That's wonderful. And what a great goal. And I think it's really great to do that together. I think as couples, just having common goals is a wonderful thing. I can tell you, I would not have running as one of my goals, but that's, again, I can barely, squeak out a mile. So
Jill, if you would have asked me that 3 years ago, I'd have been like, no way. I'm not a runner at all.
But. So again, there's hope for me in yoga and maybe in running. Maybe if a bear is chasing me.
Exactly, right? Motivation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, thank you so much for being a part of Hey Docs. And this was just such great information, and can't thank you enough for being a part of this for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed it. Always love sharing information and just, collaborating where we can.
Yeah, perfect. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, wants to get a hold of Joe Architect, can you just tell us best way to do that?
Yeah, if you go online, it's just joearchitect.com. That's the best way to find all of our info. You could email me. It's Felipe at joearchitect.com, but most people aren't going to know how to spell that. So, we're also on Instagram. If you guys are on Instagram, it's just at Joe Architect Studio. Then you can follow us, and all our info's on there as well. But we like to post media things of like projects, progress, this process. I'll be posting this too on there. So yeah.
Perfect. All righty. Well, until next time, thank you. And
right, thanks,
we'll see you again. Thanks.